So what I want to do is we want to add an Ngrx. So we'll look up Ngrx tutorial. Okay. So let's go to the installation page. All we need is this. So we'll run it. NGXS full. I haven't used NGXS. And this is quick and dirty, so I'm just trying to stick to what I know and go fast. I don't know if it's trash, man. They're very similar. Okay, so that's good. We have now Ngrx installed. So back over here, we have to start creating these actions and reducers. So if I look here, the first one I want to make is a new folder called reducers. And in my index, we want to add in clients and HTTP service, and now we want to have reducers. And I want to have a index.ts in here. GXS does the same stuff, but it's built for Angular. It's not some trash port. They're telling you they're the same thing. So, I mean, I'll play with it on the next app when I'm actually doing like a full Angular app. This one is just a very quick and dirty UI. And in this now, we want to say, we want to have a function here called app.actions.ts. And in here, I want to say import action from my Ngrx store. And so I'm going to have a new type in here called export constant called set clients equals, and we'll put the domain app set clients. Then I'm going to add my class here called set clients, which implements an action. And we want to say it has a read-only type called set clients. And then we want to have our constructor, which is going to have my clients. And then finally, I want to do export type all app actions, and I want to say this is equal to set clients. Now we need another one, which is called add client we want to have one for update client. And then we want to have one for delete client. Perfect. And then we want to have these different types in here called set clients. And then we want to say, or it can be create client, or it can be update client, or it can be remove client. And now we need to have each one of these types in here. So we have create client, like that. We have a update client. And then we're going to have a remove client. And this one is only the ID, which is a string. And Ngrx has a third-party plugin, breaks everything when you update it. Make sure you use the Redux Dev Tools. That thing is great. Yeah, I use the Redux Dev Tools. Okay, that's good. And so now we have our actions set up here for clients. And so now I want to make a new class or a new file called app.reducers or just app.reducer.ts. And in this, I want to import everything as app actions from my app.actions. And in here, we want to say import everything from app actions. And then also from the reducer. And then I want to say that we're going to have a new function in here, which is called the most important function called newState, so that we don't mutate any of our data. Like that. And all it's going to do is an object.assign, and it's an array, and then we're going to pass in the state and then the new data. And now what I want to do is I want to have a function here called a client's reducer. And we want to say all app actions. And then what I want to pass in here is a switch on my action.type. And then I can do a case for my app actions dot set clients. And we can return my new state of my state and my action.clients. Okay, our next one is a case for my app actions dot create client. And I want to say let add client new state equals my state.concat. And I want to concatenate this with my app actions.create client action dot client. And now I want to sort it. Hey there, liveordevtrying to PFan. Welcome. And when I do this, I want to say if my a.timestamp, let's say a.client name is less than my b.client name, then I want to return a 1. Otherwise, I want to return a -1. And then here we'll return a new state of my state and the add client new state. The next one is the update. And this one we want to say const modified. We're going to say update client new state equals a, and it's the same thing here, app actions dot update client of my action dot client. And then I want to get my client to modify equals state.filter, where my ID is equal to the, can I do find? Let's just do filter. We want find. When I look at an example of this, we want to say, I am from Bengal, India. I'm learning about Adobe CS. I'm your #1 fan. Adobe CS ain't bad at all. I use that quite a bit. What are you learning to work on in it? Let me look at here a JavaScript find example. Yeah. So it's this equals my update client new state.id. And then I want to get my index of update equals my state.index of client to modify. And then I want to do a const for my updated new state equals, and we're going to do the 3 ellipses to my state.slice from 0 to my index of update. And then I want to add in here my update client new state. And then we want to do the state.slice again from my index of update +1 to the state.length. And then finally, we're going to return my updated new state. So we can save a variable and just return this. The next thing that we want to do is the delete. And that's the last one, right? So for this one, we're going to have an index of delete. We're going to say ID of delete equals my, and same thing. We're going to do app actions dot create delete remove client of the action. We want to pass in the alert. Odd. And it's not an alert, sorry, it's a client. And then here I want to say const of my client to delete, and this is just a ID, equals my state.find ID equals ID of delete. And then we want to get the index of delete equals my state.index of client to delete. And then I want to return this new state of my state.slice from my 0 to my index of delete. And then we're going to go again from my state.slice to my index of delete plus 1 to my state.length. And that's it. Finally, we want to have one more, which is a default, and it just returns the state. So that is my client's reducer. So now what I need to do is in my app module, under my imports, where's my guide here? Store module for root. And we want to call it clients, and it's by my client's reducer. And now what we want to do is we want to import my client's reducer from my reducer's index, if it'll let me. Ah. That's what I was doing wrong. Okay. So now that we've registered our reducer, in my HTTP module, I should be able to add in here a new store, right? So we do that with this new private store is a store of my app state. Now we're going to call this iAppState. And now when I look at my modules, I want to add in a new type called interface iAppState. And we want to say clients is an iClient array. And so now what I can do is instead of registering here, I can register my store. No, you're going to invoke the store. So it's going to be a this.store.dispatch. And then this is a new set clients of my clients. And that's it. And so over in my clients class, where we subscribe now, we're going to subscribe to a store of my iApp state. And then this can be a store dot select clients just one second. It's a X which goes to clients like this. Let's see if this works. Over in the front end, we give it another run. Says clients works. Is it never invoking that call? If I look at my clients again, we need to do this dot. When I'm starting my HTTP service, if I look over here, because when I construct this, I wonder if I can just do this dot request clients. Let's rerun it. You almost want to do it here in the app component. That would make the most sense. Okay, it never hit that. So instead of doing that in my app component.ts, we want to add in a constructor which is going to pass in a private HTTP service called HTTP service. And then in my ng on init, which is implements, whoa, did it just hit? That was real odd. Interesting. So we want to put all this stuff back. And we want to say implements on init. And then here we're going to say this.http service.request clients. There it is. It hits. And now it works. And we're using Ngrx. So when I get these clients, I also want to get their grant. So we'll make that another type in here. Underneath models, we're going to make a new type called interface iGrant extends iBase interface. And in this one, we want to add in a grant name for the string, a authorized response type for the string, and a token grant type for the string. That's it. And in app actions, we're going to have a new action type called, and it's only one. I don't care about this any longer. Set grants. We're just going to have one class in here. Do not care about that. Called set grants. Because the grants never change. And now in the reducers, we want to copy this one. And I want this to be a grants reducer. Actually, we can change this just to be a app reducer. And so now down here we can say case app actions dot set grants. And it's just this new state. Like that. And this is called a Now they actually have to be different types of reducers, right? Because this one's called a client's reducer, and this one's called a grants reducer. And the reason for that is because over here now we want to have the it's called grants, goes to my grants reducer. If I look up at the index here, we want to add in the, yeah. And now in my models, we want to add in here grants, which is grant array. Just a second. So let's just keep going then. We're going to call this app actions. I think it's got to be a completely new reducer. Or do we need to put one in for each? If I open up a different project here, just really fast. And I look at where this is. I see. So the problem is my formatting. It actually goes like this, like that. Perfect. Okay, so now that we have that, we can request the clients. We can also request the request grants. Which just goes to grants. Last few minutes. I am so sick of all this. I am old. It's too late to reach my dream. What are you talking about? I'm old too, but this doesn't mean anything about being too late to reach your dreams. What's going on, man? We want to go ahead and set in here a set grants. How are you wasting your time? Like that. And then we're going to issue a dispatch here for it. And then when it's received up here in where we start this thing, app module, we request the grants. Let's make a new component called grants. Oh, you better chill out there a little bit, man. I gotta time you out for that one. Sorry about that, man. That's not, we run a family channel here, so just try to keep things family oriented if possible. So we got that. So now in my grants, we want to say store of the app state called store. And in my init, I want to say this.store.select, and we want to select the grants, and we want to subscribe on that. Like this. And up here we want to have a subscription for my grant subscription. And we also want to have a on destroy. And we're going to unsubscribe from here, there. And then again, we'll subscribe. Like that. And then finally, I just want to say grants as an grant array. And that's it. Now we need to make a new controller over here. So we'll stop this. Copy the client's controller. Call it a grants controller. And all this is a get grants asynchronous. Now on grants, we want to say table. We want to say table row ng4 equals let grant of grants. And then all I want to do is a table definition of my grant name, authorized type, and the token type. And then finally, in my routing, we want to add in here a path that goes to grants. And my component is grants component. Ngrx is difficult to understand. So we're just we're making a centralized store, which is what this store object is here. And instead of registering to events inside of the HTTP manager, which then could end up with different iterations of these grants objects throughout the application, by registering them to the central store, we only have one instance of that data in the application, so it should update throughout the application at the same time. And then finally, on my template, I want to add in here another button called a mat button and a nav bar element. And we want to say router link equals grants. Now, I still want to put material in here. It's been a long time since I've done that. So let me just see what's required. Angular material tutorial. Looks pretty straightforward. So let's do it. We're going to do ng add at Angular material. And what I want to do here is I'm going to make a new class, a new folder, pardon me, called modules. And I want to say this is called my material.module.ts. And this is from another project, and I can just copy this in to get all of my materials. Okay. Now that that's done, we need to add that into the component. So if I look here, we want to make sure that my module here has browser animations module, check. Browser module, check. App routing module, that's right. Okay. And now, where am I using my material module? So down here underneath imports, I want to put my material module. And I think that's it. When I run this now, Grants cannot start with a slash. Not to the can active part? What do you mean by that? Router link is not a valid attribute. So I've got a typo now. What about the security part? And now you can see we have material working. And we can see that these things are working correctly. So let's keep going. We have grants. We have clients. If I look at my entities, I don't care about auth codes. I should probably include this origins. So let's go ahead and add in a ng generate component, call it my clients cores origins. Then I want to do ng generate component for my clients post logout redirect URIs. Then we have another one for generate component called clients redirect URIs. And then we have another one called clients scopes. Okay, we still have a couple more because I need to have a ng generate component for my client auth code. And then we need to have another one for my client implicit. And then we want to have another one for my client RO resource owner password. And then we want to have client credentials. So that's pretty much all of the pages that we have in the entire app. So in my index, let's go ahead and add these in here. Export everything from client authorization code component. Client credentials component. Client implicit. Client resource owner password. And then clients. Now we have clients cores origins. Clients post logout redirect URIs. Clients redirect URIs. Clients scopes. Grants. That's it. We also want to include export everything from the reducers index. And then finally, we want to say export everything from my modules material module. Make sure everything compiles. So let's go back into our models now, and we're going to add in our individual clients here. So we have a interface for my iClient implicit create request, which extends iBase interface. Oh, it doesn't. It's just this. And so now in this one, we're going to recreate this request, which is here. So the first one I want to have is a interface called a iClient create request. And this is going to have a grant ID for a string. It's going to have a client name for a string. It's going to have a client ID for a string. Token expiration in minutes, which is a number. Issuer URI is a string. Audience is a string. Now, we need to also have in here a number of these scopes. So we're going to have a interface iClient scope create request. And in this, we're going to say scopes. It's called client. Scopes is my iClient scope create request array. And all that this has in it is a scope name for the string. So for implicit, we also need to have allow remember login as a Boolean, enable local login as a Boolean, enable external login as a Boolean, validate issuer as a Boolean, validate audience is a Boolean, validate cores is a Boolean. We also want to have these interface iClient cores origin create request. And in this one, we want to make this a iClient create request. And in this one, we just want origin URI as a string. So now we can have the client cores origins is a iClient cores origin create request. And then we have a interface iClient redirect URI create request. And this one is a redirect URI. And this will be client redirect URIs. And the last one here is a client post logout redirect URI. And that needs to be a iClient post logout redirect URI create request. Like that. Okay, we got a few more. We also have this authorization code create request. Which extends iClient create request. And this one's going to have a client secret for the string. A issue refresh tokens is a boolean. A refresh token expiration days is a number. A allow remember login is a boolean. A enable local login is a boolean. A enable external login is a boolean. A validate issuer is true is a boolean. A validate audience is a boolean. A validate issuer signing key is a boolean. Validate cores. Then you're also going to have the client course origins, redirect URIs, and post logout redirect URIs. That's 2 out of 4. The next one is this one. And this is a interface iClient resource owner password create request, which extends iClient create request. And it just has client secret, issue refresh tokens as a boolean, refresh token expiration days is an integer, validate issuer, audience, cores, signing key, and then client cores origins. And the last one here is iClient client credentials create request. That's it. So we need to create the individual pages for each of these. The first thing that I want to look at here in my models is I want to have a grant ID, which is a string. So in my clients, I want to have a function called getGrant, and it returns an iGrant. And I want to subscribe here on grants. And all I want to do is I want to grab the grants of the ID, which is a string. And all we want to do is return this.grants.findX where my ID equals ID. So on my clients component, I can say get grant of my client.id dot grant name. Cannot read property grant name of undefined. This is grant ID. There we go. So over here, I'm going to do this a little different. Because what I want to do is I'm going to bring up the data access layer. And I want to say that this is called services. Pages. See if this actually works this time. I'll have to restart the computer before I can get that. So what I want to do is in my services, we're going to bring in this data access layer. And I'm just going to rename it data access layer. And I'm going to call this .ui, no interface. Now we have get grants, get grant create update. That's good. Get clients, I want to include my, not those, the client core's origins, the post logouts, the redirect URLs, the scopes, the grant, the that's it. And we want to include those for all of these. No, I'm retracting that. So instead of doing that, I want to make a model and I want to call it payload. And in this, I want to say we have a number of these client called clients. We're also going to have a number of these grant called grants. We're going to have a number of these client post logout redirect URIs. We want to have one for my client redirect URI. We want to have one for my client course origins. And another one for my client scopes. And so in my models now, okay, I want to make a new one up here called interface payload. Call it iPayload. And I want to say that this is going to have my clients on it called iClient, my grants called grants. And actually, this thing is app state. So I'm going to make a new service. And I'm going to call this data access layer. Probably looks familiar. We can get rid of the get ignore in here. Get rid of this weather forecast controller. Get rid of this weather forecast controller. Now, in this, I want to say we have a protected read-only application database context called context. And then we're going to have a constructor where we pass that in. And all we're going to do in here is have a couple of different things. We're going to have a public virtual asynchronous task of a client array called get clients asynchronous. We're going to have a public virtual asynchronous task of grant called get grants asynchronous. We're going to have a public virtual asynchronous task of a client cores origin array called get clients cores origins asynchronous. We're going to have another one in here called an asynchronous task of a client post logout redirect UR, which is called get clients post logout redirect URIs asynchronous. And then we're going to have another one called a task of my client redirect URIs, get clients redirect URIs asynchronous. And then finally, we're going to have a public virtual asynchronous task of a client scope called get clients scopes asynchronous. So this one is a return await context.clients.toList asynchronous. That's it. Or toArray asynchronous. And this is a return await context.grants.toArray asynchronous. And this is a return await context.clients cores origins.toArray asynchronous. This one is a context.clients post logout redirect URIs, and then finally we have a context.client redirect URIs. I guess we have one more for a client's scopes to array asynchronous. And now we can extend all those into a single task here of a payload called get payload asynchronous. Like this. And this is just going to be clients, client origins, clients post logouts. Like that. And then down here, we're going to inject data access layer, data access layer. And now in my new controller, call it a payload controller. Like that. Which means that these other two controllers, I can just scrap them for now. So in my web app, now in app state, we should have clients, grants, clients post logout redirect URIs, clients cores origins, clients redirect URIs, clients scopes. So a interface for my iClient post logout redirect URI extends my iBase interface, and it's going to be a client ID, which is a string, a post logout redirect URI, which is a string, and that's it. Next one is this client redirect URI. And that's going to be another client ID, which is a string, a redirect URI, which is a string. We also have a client cores origin. And that's another client ID and a origin URL, which is a string. And the last one is a interface called iClient scope, which is a client ID and a scope name. Okay, so those are done. So back up here now we can say iClient post logout redirect URI, iClient redirect URI, a iClient cores origin, and then a iClient scope. And so now here we can say clients post logout redirect URIs is a clients post logout redirect URIs reducer. So over here in our reducers, I'm going to add in a couple more. One called set client post logout redirect URIs. Okay, we're going to have another one of those for the redirect URIs, another one for the client cores origins, and then another one for the client's scopes. Like that. Oops, that's okay, we'll fix that in just a second. Now I'll add these in here, which is called set client post logout redirect URIs, which is a iClient post logout redirect array. Okay, we have another one for the set client redirect URIs. And we have another one here for the set client cores origins. And then the last one is the scopes. Okay, so now in the reducer, we're going to have one for each of these. So we have a clients post logout redirect URIs reducer. Like that. We have a clients redirect URIs reducer. We have another one for the clients cores origins reducer. And then we have another one here for the client's scopes reducer. All right, that's all of those. Now in my component module, I need to have these. Client post logout redirect URIs reducer. And then your next state is this one, which is a client's redirect URIs reducer. And then you have a client's cores origins reducer. And then you have a client's scopes reducer, like that. Ngrx? This is Ngrx. Now that we have all of those, in my HTTP service, instead of having this, I'm going to have a new function called request payload. And we're just getting iappState from my payload URL. And then we're going to subscribe my app state. Like this. Get rid of these two. And now what I can do is I can do a if my app state exists, then I want to do a this.store.dispatch, and it's a new set clients of my app state.clients. And then we have set grants. You have another one for set client post logout redirect URIs. You have another one for set client redirect URIs. You have another one for set client cores origins. And then another one for set client scopes. And that's it. So now in my app component, we can just say request payload. Let me go ahead and rebuild it. What a machine, says Chuck Novice. What do you mean? Okay, that's working. So back over here, we can run it. You steamrolled those lines of code. Yeah, just trying to go quick, you know what I mean? I've done this a bunch with the Ngrx implementations. Well, besides, once you get the first one in, the rest are just cookie cutter. You know what I mean? Oh, I lost my microphone there. I got to get a new board. Now, it never loaded the payload controller, so status text okay, payload controller. Now this is saying that I have a problem. Because these things are entities, they're not self-referenced. So here, in this one, we're going to need to make a new set of DTOs. I don't know why my computer is going so slowly. And we're going to say this is a client DTO. Easy enough. And then we can get rid of this grant. Okay. We want to make this inherit from a base DTO. So slow. And this is a abstract class, which is only going to have a GUID for the ID and a date time for the timestamp. And then we need to have another one here. I've been adding state machines to everything these days. Are you talking about like Ngrx? And then this one's going to be grant DTO. Which looks like this one. Then we're going to have another one here. Call it a client post redirect. We're going to say post logout redirect URI DTO. Enlighten me about Ngrx. I'm outdated with web stuff. We're on front end, right? Yeah, we're on front end. So let's say that we're looking at this Angular application, okay? And you come to this page called clients, okay? This is going to display a list of clients that are on the page. And when you look in Angular, before we were using Ngrx, we were using an HTTP client here and just issuing a GET. So every time that a user browses back to the clients page, a new HTTP request would be sent out to retrieve the clients, and then they would be loaded only for this page. So let's say that later on, if I'm on the grants page and it has a connection to clients, I would need to have a call to grants that then would populate clients as well, right? So what Ngrx does is it allows me to have one central store of data. So essentially I have one location now which holds this app state. And it's going to hold all of my clients, all of my grants, all of my logout redirects, all of my different entities. And then in the application itself, I'm going to be subscribing to the store. And now these are just reference variables. So that way there's only ever one instance of the data in the application. And what that will allow me to do is then, like, for example, if somebody goes in and modifies a client, I can just make a new state with the new client and it updates across the entire application. It's not pieces of data disjointed in different pages. Okay, so that's good. Yeah, it's super, it's really good for keeping the number of calls down and also making the application act more like an application instead of like individual pages of data. Let's see, this is good here. So now, back over here in my DTOs, we did the grant, we did the post logout redirect URI. Like that. Now we're going to do a client redirect URI. On smaller projects, you can keep everything in a service and manage it yourself. Yep. So this is a client redirect URI DTO. I need to have a client scope DTO. And the last one is a client cores origin DTO. Training the monkeys on the way of doing it is a smoothie standards. It's just working on a project where every day it's in a giant mess. The app is 6 megs, and that's not including all the CSS and external JS libs. Yeah, without having fundamentals, I mean, not fundamentals, without having some kind of, I'm a big advocate of, if you're working in a large team, of developing some kind of a framework built on abstract functions and services so that there's consistency in the development between the teams. Ngrx definitely helps with that on the front end. This is a client cores origin DTO. Client cores origin DTO. Okay. Now that we have all of the DTOs down here, we can change these to be DTOs. Now what I need to do is I need to add in auto mapper. We already fixed it. It makes everyone use a data store rather than their only ways. It makes code review simpler. Yep. And in here, I want to add auto mapper. I like it because it doesn't have the redundancy with pulling data in multiple locations. Seen a lot of bugs associated with that. And now in startup, I should be able to do a protected IMapper create auto mapper, and we should be able to do a sorry, it's been a little bit since I've done this. Just a second. All right, Keith, I'll see you in a little bit. I'll be back on after lunch, I'm sure. So this is a protected mapper, and we want to return a new mapper configuration, which is going to be passing in this dot build mapper. Create mapper. And what we're going to have in here is a c.createMap, and we're going to go from the client DTO to the from the client to the client DTO, and then again for the grant to the grant DTO, and then again for the client cores origin DTO, like that, and then client post logout redirect URI goes to the DTO, and then redirect URI like that, and then we also have the client scope, and that's it. Okay. So we'll add up here a services.add singleton of a IMapper, call it my create mapper. Like that. So now in my data access layer, I can inject here my I mapper. And now what I can do is I can have a protected virtual asynchronous task of client DTO array called get clients asynchronous. And it's going to do this. And then this. And then for each var client and clients, we're going to do dtos.add a mapper.map to a client DTO of my client. And then return my dtos.to array. Rinse and repeat for the grant DTO. And now this is going to be await get clients asynchronous. And then a await get grants asynchronous. Okay, we have a protected virtual asynchronous task of a client post logout redirect URI DTO called get clients post logout redirect URIs asynchronous. Clients redirect, clients post logout redirect URLs, client post logout redirect URI DTO. This is a grants. This is a grant. This is a clients post logout redirect URIs. Like that. Okay, we have another one here for the redirect URI. Okay, we also have to do the protected virtual asynchronous task of a client scope DTO array called get client scopes asynchronous. This is a await get clients redirect URIs asynchronous. This is a await get clients post logout redirect URIs. This is for the scopes. And the last one is the cores redirect URI, or the cores origins. This is a client cores origin DTO. Like that. And then up here now we can just do await get clients cores origins asynchronous, and then this is a await get client scopes asynchronous. Now we'll run it. Give it just a second to start. There it is. We can see it hit, and there's our results. So all of our data for the entire app is now being loaded in here at once. And so to illustrate that, if I look over here where I am doing my client's page and I'm passing this grant type, I could do a get clients post logout redirect URIs of my ID, which is a string, I client post logout redirect array, like that. And then down here we can subscribe this. Like that. And then we're going to unsubscribe it here. And what you want to do is you want to return this dot clients post logout redirect URIs, and we want to filter where my client ID equals ID. So just to test this isn't what we're actually going to do. We're going to do it with a partial, because I want to say table definition here. I wonder if I could do, well, I got to look at that again real quick. I never remember it. Table, HTML. Yeah, so it's a TR, and then we can say TD, TH. We're going to say client name, client ID, grant type, and then we want to say count, post, logout, redirect URIs, and then same thing with the redirect URIs. This one, and you want to do this of my client.id .length, and then this is the same one except it's just redirect URIs. So in this we're going to have another one like this. Like that. And then we're going to unsubscribe it. And then this one, we're going to do it one more time, except it's going to not have the post logout redirect URIs. Like that. So when I look at this again, now we have our table headers, and we can see the counts of each of the redirect URIs. So this is great. Now the next thing I need to do is when you click on these, we want it to go to a client page. But it needs to be by the grant type. So we could do a on click equals navigate to client. And we want to pass in here my client.id. And I can say a navigate to client of an ID. Now if I look here, I should be able to do a client equals this dot clients dot find where my ID equals ID. And then I want to say grant equals get this dot get grant of my client dot grant ID. Now I want to switch on my grant dot grant name and if it is a authorization code, then you want to go to one page. If it is implicit, you want to go to another page. If it is resource owner password, you're going to go to another page, and then if it is client credentials, and then finally you're going to have a default. So here you're going to do a this.router.navigate to. And we're going to say client's authorization code. And this one is implicit. And this one is RO password. This one is client credentials. This one is it's only going to be singular. Just client. So over here in my routes, we're going to add in the path for client authorization code. And that's going to be a component called my client authorization code component. We're also going to have a client implicit, which is a component called client implicit component. And then we're going to have a path, which is a client RO password, which is a component client resource owner password component. And the last one is a path for my client credentials. And it's going to be a component called client credentials component. And then we're also going to have one more here just called client. And now we're going to make a new component here called ngGenerate component called client. Now, for the router, I need to inject private router. And then finally, in my routes for here, I need to say that this can pass in an ID. Second here. Ah. So it is sending me to the right place. However, it's not making them look like links. So we want to say Angular CLI link doesn't look like link. we need to add in here just a router link like that. There it is. And now we can go to the individual pages. So one thing we need to do is we need to pass across this ID. Yeah, that's right. Okay. Now you can see that it's in fact going to the correct app. And there's our grants. So we're making some good progress on this front end. I need to go get some lunch, so we're going to take a break. When we come back, it'll be 2:30, so just 2 hours from now. If you have any questions, it's a great time to pop them into the chat at our Discord, discord.pixelhorrorstudios.com, and I put all these videos up at youtube.pixelhorrorstudios.com. Thanks for staying with me, guys, and I'll see you in just a little bit. Alrighty, bye, guys.